We are officially less than 100 days from the largest construction family reunion in North America. That's right, ConExpo ConAg is going to be here before we know it. See and test the new equipment. Ask the technical experts. Find out what your business will be using tomorrow. Make the connections that matter. If you haven't registered yet, there's still time to secure your tickets. Visit conexpoconag.com or click the link in the show notes and use promo code podcast20 to get 20% off. That's right, 20% off with promo code podcast20. If you already have your tickets to the show, join us in counting down and comment on our daily commercial news, Journal of Commerce, at Construction Record Podcast, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram feeds to let us know you're going to be there and what you're most excited to see. Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry. As we reach the end of 2022, it's time to look back at some of the highlights of the year for our podcast. I've done so by picking clips from the top 5 podcasts of last year as determined by the number of downloads. Our first clip is from the number 5 podcast in our list, which is an interview with ConstructConnect chief economist Alex Carrick and senior economist Michael Guckes, one of several we did this year. This interview in particular is about the possibilities of a recession as the economy is buffeted by inflation, war in Ukraine, and other factors. Though this interview took place in July, many of the same factors are still in play. Have a listen. Everything we've heard is that we're heading towards a recession, both in the U.S. and Canada. And so I'm going to start with Alex, and I'm going to ask, what are the conditions for a recession? How are they similar and different in the U.S. and Canada, and what can we expect in the next few months?
Yeah, well, we seem to be determined to talk ourselves into a recession. And the word that is governing everything right now is inflation. And in the United States, the latest inflation number was 9.1% year over year. And that's got everybody freaked out. Mm-hmm. And it mainly centers on energy prices, and in particular gasoline, because gasoline is now 60% year over year. I would point out, though, that inflation, it's going to continue to be strong, but it's starting to moderate for some items, non-energy items, because there's a base effect that's in inflation. Like you compare the price this year versus the price last year, and the price last year was increasing. So if you look at some of the items that were really contributing to inflation, like the cost of used cars and trucks, that has come down versus what it was 3 months ago, come down considerably. And it's the same for things like hotel rooms and motel rooms and so on. So inflation is gradually going to ease, the number's going to ease. But in the meantime, interest rates are being raised dramatically, both in the United States and Canada. The differences between the two economies in terms of recession, I would say, would center on retail spending. In the US, retail spending got way above trend line. Like the economy bounced back very strongly. Mm-hmm. And so retail spending, if you chart it and you draw a trend line through it, it's way above trend line. Canada retail spending has improved with an improving economy, but it's not far off the trend line. So Canada's got a little bit more leeway there, and also foreign trade. The other one is foreign trade. The U.S. has a huge foreign trade deficit. Canada is starting to record some large foreign trade surpluses, and that's very good in terms of supporting GDP, because the net figure between exports and imports contributes directly to GDP's bottom line. And in the last month, Canada had the largest trade surplus because the price of oil is up and other commodities are up. So Canada's got a little bit of a cushion on the trade side, on the foreign trade side.
Okay, Michael, what's your take from the U.S.?
Yeah, I think Alec is right on in a lot of regards. He did mention sentiment early on in his response. The latest sentiment reading from the U.S. was the lowest in recorded history at 50. It's unprecedented. Again, as Alec also very wisely pointed out, a lot of that has to do with this worry around inflation. Mm-hmm. I think the challenges that we will see in both countries they can both be explained in forms of supply and demand, right? And on the labor side, right, labor in Canada, the unemployment rate's 4.9%. I looked it up just recently here. You know, in the U.S., it's similarly low or proportionately low compared to historical standards, respective historical standards for each country. You know, so we're both nations are fighting this low employment situation. I can speak in the U.S. to the fact that the baby boomers have left the market more quickly than expected, than anticipated, largely as a result of COVID. We've seen the labor productivity, the labor force of those older age cohorts decline in a step fashion rather than as a sort of a slower transitional trend. And to backfill that is, you know, younger workers, you know, and the 16 to 24-year-old cohort, you know, is doing what it can. But again, it's a function of numbers. You know, if the baby boomer generation is larger than is leaving at a faster pace than the 16 to 24-year-olds can physically replace those positions. And that's to say nothing of the experience gap and the knowledge gap there, right? Somebody who's been working in an industry for many decades is obviously going to have more capability, more productivity for their employer and for the economy than someone who's new and coming into that same industry.
Our next pod is also from July, and it's about Stantec's work on the East Midtown Greenway in New York City, which adds waterfront space between East 38th Street and East 61st Street on the East River. In this clip, I talked to Stantec project manager Olga Gorbanova. Manhattan, as we all know, is very densely packed, and this is a very developed area to begin with. How did you have to accommodate that, and the fact that, you know, it's New York, the quote-unquote city that never sleeps? So I assume this is a 24-hour job as well. You had to work around all those factors while building this thing.
The Greenway project has three main components. What we call the in-water structure is the structural component that supports the topside park, and there's a pedestrian bridge that connects the Greenway structure to the Sutton Place neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. The design of the in-water structure and topside elements are actually very interdependent. And there was a challenge to provide enough soil volume within the structure to support the trees and actually allow them to thrive while maintaining a minimal structural depth to preserve any water views that you can see from Manhattan. We were able to come up with a solution of a stepped structural section, which provides the soil volume needed and minimizes the depth of the structure. We have tub girders within the structure that also provide some vertical space for soil to support the trees. And we used soil cells under the bikeway to allow for uncompacted soil and lateral soil for the tree roots to grow into. And we also have some trench drains that along the bikeway that collect the rainwater as well as disperse it into the soil cells to allow the water to reach the tree roots across the entire section. Another challenge was finding space for the landside ramp within the Sutton Place neighborhood. The community loves the Sutton Place Park where the ramp lands. And the pedestrian bridge, which was designed by our partners, Rosales and Partners, connects the Greenway to the neighborhood. So in order to minimize impacts, we were able to connect the ramp at the highest ground, which was the north side of the park. We shortened the ramp lengths while maintaining universal accessibility. The ramp has an 8% slope, 2 landings, and curves within the alignment to minimize the footprint within the park and respond to the community's desires to maintain as much of the existing park as possible. And lastly, from a design perspective, we were designing adjacent to residential buildings. And in order to ensure that none of the lighting disturbed the neighbors, we advocated for non-standard davit poles in the pedestrian size in order to eliminate any light that may reach the windows above.
At number 3 on our list of top 5 podcasts of the year is a look at the future of construction with Jazz Saraw from Procore, who summarized upcoming technological trends for the industry as we entered 2022. There's AI, automation, drones, all the usual stuff. What's in the works there for 2022, and what's sort of beyond that in the works for in terms of technology?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Warren, I want to thank you for having me on. I was just going back through some of my old notes. I realized that the last time I was on a podcast with you was back in 2018, which
a long time ago. A
lot
has changed.
Time ago. Yeah, lots changed, right? And I was actually listening back to it, and I thought to myself, it's remarkable how, even with like the pandemic and everything, like the topics we were talking about, how much of that stuff has really stayed the same. So I think when we were talking about topics around digital transformation in 2018. We talked about the fact that innovation was borderless, that digital innovation and technology, and the needs of a lot of construction organizations across the planet were no different whether you were Canadian or Australian, English, American, or French or German or Italian. So. And I don't think that's changed. In fact, the push towards digital transformation and technological adoption has happened at a breakneck speed in the last 4 years, and we've seen that in a lot of different places. So you mentioned things like drones and automation and AI, and those are just some examples, right? So when we look at AI, one area where Procore's like heavily invested is in using artificial intelligence in order to allow our organizations that work with our platform to make more effective decisions. And within AI, leveraging machine learning, which is sort of that deep learning type of, custom algorithm type of, programming, which has a sort of a self-learning aspect to it. So look, if we can, identify insights on behalf of a construction company, organization, owner, developer, specialty contractor, or who have you, and we can provide those learnings in real time, and we can mitigate risk on a job site, or we can improve overall efficiencies and how a construction project is delivered, then I think those are things that a lot of construction companies and leaders are looking to in 2022. And a lot of it goes back to a topic, again, that we talked about in 2018 that again, we're still talking about it in 2022, which is the skilled labor gap and labor shortage in general. And it's really important for us as an industry to find ways to do more with less, to become more efficient, to manage our workforce more effectively. And things like AI and ML really allow us to do that in a more meaningful way. And it'll never replace people, right? I mean, I think that's one thing we want to make clear. Like, technology is an enabler. Technology provides us the opportunity to up-level, upskill, and develop our people, but it will not ultimately, remove things, related to the craft of construction and the need for, a human workforce that's critical to the success of any project.
Our second most popular pod of the year was an interview with British Columbia Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure Chief Engineer of Highway Services, Ian Pilkington, about climate resiliency and infrastructure. This interview was also from the beginning of the year, and at the time, BC had just started recovering from massive floods in November 2021 that did unprecedented damage to roads, highways, and bridges in the Lower Mainland and beyond. Besides the immediate floods and climate change, there's COVID, which sounds like, yes, you have to social distance, but also there's going to be more trucks, which means heavier stuff on bridges, delivering more stuff. There's going to be, it'll just shift everyone's priorities. So how do you even predict for that going forward with design?
Yeah, well, definitely when it comes to things like COVID, and we're definitely seeing a lot of, and we notice out with the transport trucks that are running up and down on our various highways, that we we do have a planning engineers, and we try and figure out and plan for that. The way we plan for those kind of things is we basically look at all those trucks as axles on the road. So we start looking at the GVW of the trucks, the number of trucks that are traveling, and we turn that into an equivalent single axle load or an easel, and then that's how we'll design for pavement structures or for bridges. So as traffic increases, we can plan for that. We either design. Fortunately, the way it's been working is even though there's more trucks, the weights haven't changed or increased too much, so we can design the bridges to handle that. And then basically after that, we monitor. So we always all of our bridges get inspected once a year by our bridge area managers. So we just keep an eye on things for any wear or fatigue. But the bridges are designed to handle the loads that these trucks are running, even if there are more of them. And then the next thing is that we need to expand highways, four laning, and things of that nature. So that those things we can all design into. We're kind of fortunate on the construction side with COVID. We were very fortunate in the highways world, at least highway construction. Construction never stopped. It did stop for things like vertical infrastructure, like buildings, and because you're working in confined spaces. But fortunately, in the roadworks area, lots of the people are in individual excavators. You're out in the open areas, so we were able to meet all of the health protocols and still keep building things. So fortunately, that industry wasn't too affected by COVID. I mean, there were certain things like transporting people around. You had to use more vehicles because you couldn't have as many people in a crew cab and things like that. But that part still worked pretty good. But you're right. We'll have to watch now. Goods movement is going to be a big thing. That's the biggest thing we noticed in this big event when we lost all of our highway network. Suddenly, goods movement in and out of Vancouver was critical, especially both railways going down at the same time. Things like that, we'll have to make sure we're building enough resilience into our infrastructure.
And our most popular podcast of the year is an interview with Scott Chatterton. He's the VDC and BIM Solutions Director from BIM One, and he talks all about how building information modeling and wood building design can work together. You could go into how BIM and wood can interact, because it's not those two, maybe they should go together, but it's not something that springs to mind right off the top of your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good point. And what we've seen over the last number of years, right? BIM has always been an integral part of the design process for the construction industry. What we're seeing now is with the rise of prefabrication, off-site fabrication, and the use of heavy timber or mass timber in architecture and in construction, we're starting to see more of a utilization of BIM as part of the fabrication process. So a lot to do with the way that they fabricate the mass timber components using CNC machines and digital tools around their fabrication process. We're actually linking the two together now. So utilizing the BIM as part of the design process and then integrating the fabrication process into it. So, there's a lot of discussion around direct to build, where we're actually taking the model and the design and then giving that to the fabricators, and then either integrating a fabrication model into the design model, or just doing the design in a way that the fabricators can utilize it straight off the bat. So we're certainly seeing a lot more utilization of BIM around integrated with the wood industry. So it's really interesting time.
And so the maybe report's not the right word, guide, because it's called the Building Information Modeling for Wood Buildings, an introductory guide. So introductory would presume that there is still some learning to be done out there. So is that something you've run into as you've worked on this guide?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in the industry for many years, and especially involved with the promotion of BIM within the AECO industry. And even today, we're still working with people that are learning about BIM, wanting to integrate digital tools and digital practice within their practice, whether that's design, architectural design, engineering, construction, fabrication, suppliers, trades. So we still see a great deal of that mix. And the guide that we have, the BIM for wood building design, is kind of an introductory stepping stone for for all members of the AECO industry to be able to understand and learn more about how BIM can be utilized for wood buildings, all the way from the owners to the designers and the contractors.
And that's it for 2022. You can hear us on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify. And you can listen to all our 2022 and earlier episodes on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening, and let's all look forward to 2023.